Last Friday was Friday the 13th, meaning that dark forces from distant universes compelled people here on Earth to act like a bunch of fucking idiots. I've noticed that this also happens during full moons and Super Bowls. I read a particularly charming example on Broadly, which is the subsection of Vice for women people, because I guess they would otherwise not read Vice because it would hurt their woman people brains. The article in question was titled, How the Patriarchy Stole Friday the 13th from Women and Made It Evil. So I'm going to need everybody out there to just take a moment to prepare yourselves for the utter bullshit that is about to come. The post thesis is conveniently in its first sentence. Before Friday the 13th became associated with bad luck and the horror movie franchise that refuses to die, it used to be considered a powerful day for celebrating feminine energy. For evidence, Broadly contributor Kimberly Lawson reached out to expert historians who have extensively studied the history of women's rights and superstitious practices. Okay, no, just kidding. She interviewed two people, Gina Spriggs, a North Carolina-based futurist and holistic intuitive, and Tanaz Chubb, an LA-based intuitive. Wow, two intuitives in one article. That's awesome. For those who don't know what an intuitive is, it's basically an old-school psychic fraud with a fancy new name that lets the person in question charge substantially more than the $10 a pop palm reader on your corner. The intuitives tell a remarkably gullible Lawson that before Christianity, Friday the 13th was considered a day to honor, and I quote, the divine feminine. But once Jesus had a party with 13 people and then he went and got himself murdered the next day, a Friday, everybody now thinks that Friday the 13th is evil. That's a popular rendition of how Friday the 13th got its reputation, and it might have something to do with it, but it's not necessarily true. Friday has long been seen in Western cultures as an unlucky day for one reason or the other, and 13 has often been considered an unlucky number. So really, they're just two evil tastes that taste evil together. Friday the 13th wasn't even a thing until the late 19th century, which is a long time after patriarchal Christianity was born. And no, prior to that, it was not considered a day to celebrate how magical and mysterious women are, despite the intuitive's completely evidence-free claim that it was. In fact, prior to Christianity, there wasn't really much of a standardized calendar at all. The Greeks even had a number of different calendars that they all used concurrently, some of which had no names for the months, let alone names for the days like Friday. They were just called Day 1, Day 2, etc. Most of them were purely numerical like that, so the idea of a Friday the 13th would have been completely foreign to them. The intuitives claim Friday the 13th was a day of the goddess because women on average have about 13 menstrual cycles per year, which might be true but doesn't actually describe why Friday would be super important. I mean, if you were going to pick a day, wouldn't it be Monday, which is a day dedicated to the moon, which is feminine? And yes, they do go into that. My favorite quote from the article is this one, spoken by Spriggs. She says that 13 is also the number, too, of annual cycles of the moon, viewed by Earth-based religions as female. Earth-based religions, you guys. Neptune-based religions, for the record, see the Earth's moon as more of a dude, while Jupiter-based religions don't even recognize it as a valid person with an identifiable sex. The intuitives also take time to long for the good old days when women's periods were worshipped. It's true that some cultures thought of menstruation, or still think of menstruation, as a magical and powerful thing, but that wasn't always exactly a good thing, since it could result in women being accused of witchcraft and hanged, or in women being relegated to shame huts for a few days every month. And yeah, that's still happening today, as evidenced by the teenage Nepalese girl who died in a menstruation hut just this past week. The insipid article ends with the intuitives urging women to celebrate Friday the 13th by buying pink shit, like pink underwear and pink flowers and pink power tools, I guess. This too is completely inane, considering that the idea that pink is for women is a concept less than 100 years old and has been repeatedly used in our patriarchal culture as a way to code things as being weaker or for women. In conclusion, fuck all this bullshit. Continue to celebrate Friday the 13th the way it was intended, by making fun of dummies who think that things are unlucky on that day, and by watching terrible horror films, because, hey, there's loads of blood in those things, right? And blood is totally feminine. It's even pinkish. It counts.